I agree with you, honestly. I mean, I on one hand, I think like our prefrontal cortex is like our greatest gift, but also like our worst enemy, because we over complicate things and we try to, I think, almost give too much of a spectrum. And this coming from somebody who's in the like queer community, not talking about spectrums. But like also as a nurse, I get real irritated with like the pain scale, for example. Like, yes, everybody feels pain, but for me to sit and like quantify it to a number, everybody is going to have their two is going to be different than my two. And so on some level, how I'm trained is to like ignore somebody's verbal number and look at other indicators of what could be like what their pain is like. So looking at their blood pressure, their heart rate, right? Their respiratory rate. Somebody who is in an extreme amount of pain, more, after looking at a variety of people, um, tend to like hold their breath. So their respirations drop, but their heart rate spikes, right? Like this is like trended. So on some level, I almost feel like I want to say that like the human race has gone and just like given too much credit to like individuality and stuff, and being like, no, you've never stubbed your toe. You cannot be in 10 out of 10 pain. You just can't. Like, and stubbing your toe is not a 10 out of 10. It may be if we are sitting here going, which is this, and this is what we've done, is we've said, you know what, everybody gets to have their own like version of pain. So somebody who comes in and stubs their toe, when they tell me that it's a 10 out of 10, I just have to believe them. Even though I know from experience that that's not a 10 out of 10. And there are worse things. And in fact, like now I have to ask, like, so 10 is me cutting your arm off with a butter knife. Now classify your stubbed toe, please. Like, and so like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that it's a good thing that we've given humans this real large expansive canvas to work on, and we allow everybody to have their way with their emotions and how they feel and getting to express? Or do you feel like in some ways it's actually a hindrance to us? Allison, this one's for you.
It's a good question. I definitely think, well, sort of going back to what we were talking about before, is that there is, yeah, we're sort of giving everybody this ability to express however they want without necessarily giving them guidelines on how is best to do it. It's like you first sort of need to develop that emotional intelligence and like understand how emotions work, how are they processed, what is the most effective way to fully feel and to not necessarily feel with the mind, but feel with like the body and all of that stuff. So you're giving people who don't even know how it works the ability to just like do whatever they want with it and to classify whatever they want. So I think it really starts with like doing that work to more broadly like give people that basis of knowledge of emotional intelligence. Like that's what we really need, is for people to understand their feelings and like how it's supposed to work and how you're supposed to feel it and all these things. Because otherwise, yeah, like there's no, they don't even have guidelines, is almost like the point. It's like there is no guideline. So it's like when someone comes in and says like, oh, I stubbed my toe and it's a 10, it's like, well, yeah, you don't know what the other options are because there's not that education, there's not that basis of understanding of like their emotions and how it's supposed to be felt. So I think that that's really what it comes down to, is like we as humans, now that we have done so much work in this space, really need to work on creating some sort of education around it so that people can themselves be able to not only like work with themselves, which is such a valuable tool, but be able to like just even understand what's coming up.
Who do you think is responsible for helping to create that emotional intelligence? Do you think it's a parent's job? Do you think that it's an individual's job once they're older to just be like, you know what, this is I'm a fully formed human now and it's my job.
I want to say it's almost like everybody's job. I think that it's definitely going to start at the parent level because for the first few years, that's kind of the only exposure people have, that or, daycare providers or family members, like extended family. And then I'd say as they get older, it's, they spend so much time in school that it almost becomes a responsibility of school. And then as you get older, you're responsible for yourself. So then you have to decide if you want to take it on. But I think it really does start with what they're exposed to at that, those like 0 to 5 years. So are their parents emotionally intelligent enough? And I've seen in my practice where people would come in and say, my parents were not, my parents weren't emotionally intelligent and they really struggled. And I started realizing as a parent myself now that I want to do things differently. And so there they are taking on the responsibility as adults to learn not only for themselves, but so that they can be better and teach their children. So I would say it definitely comes in stages depending on where that person is in life. And it's really hard because if we weren't taught that, we don't know how to teach it. So did our parents know? And luckily, you might have a parent that's like, I'm very aware of what I didn't get and what I probably needed. So I'm gonna make sure that I give this to my child. But then you have the other parents that just say, well, this is how I was raised, and so this is all I know, and don't maybe necessarily know that they can do different or even want to do different. So yeah, I feel like all my answers are very layered. Like I don't have a very hard yes or no. Because
No, that's
yeah,
okay. That is okay. That is life. And in fact, I have a
hmm
question for you kind of
yeah,
surrounding that of like, I know that you and your sister are very like into the stars and the woo.
hmm
And I'm interested in your thought process of like, there are these higher advanced civilizations out there. Many of our consciousnesses have been in those star being bodies. Many of them had probably a much higher EQ than humans do. Do you think that it's purely like by happenstance of like the duality of Earth and this particular playground that we are sort of like cut off, I guess, from this ability to fully function and like process? And do you think that somewhere in our soul contract, maybe there is something in there that if somebody could just figure it out, if somebody could find it, if somebody could find the spot on the birth chart
hmm
that like spoke to like emotions and processing or feeling or emoting whatever, that if we could just lock that down, that
I,
whole teaching process could be easier.
I don't think anything is really like happenstance. Like I don't necessarily believe in like coincidences anymore. Kind of like Alison was saying earlier. I think everything is like definitely done by design. I think so. What is it quite like? The question is, do I think that it's like could it be
That
written into the contract?
Yeah, like, and then maybe there's something that us intuitives have missed over the years, that there's so much talk now of ETs and star beings, and
Uh-huh.
and I just kind of get this feeling like star beings are higher dimensional beings, but they started off in a similar density to us. They evolved their EQ.
Right.
We lived in those bodies. We have that in our DNA. We have that in our memory, in our akasha.
hmm
Why wouldn't it serve us to have put in somewhere, whether it be in our soul contract or somewhere else, a like, here's the button, maybe not the miracle button that like solves all problems with like EQ, but like gets us just a little closer.
I think that
I think that's kind of what's happening now. And I think that we all came in at this time maybe for a reason, because well, one, I think humans, I think we're just, I'm sorry guys, like I just think we're kind of like dumb, and I think we don't have the capacity to understand a lot of things, right? Even things like aliens, and like our minds are just so they're so little that we can't think that way. So I think it has to kind of come in stages, because otherwise, if we did have a miracle button that we could push, like we'd all go into like mass psychosis, I think, if we really knew what was happening. And I mean, I think that's why some of like the alien stuff even now is becoming more talked about, because I think they're kind of like dipping their toes in to see, okay, how much can they handle? How much can they tolerate? If we talk about this, what are they gonna? What's the response gonna be? And I think now the response has just kind of been like, okay, we already know this. Moving on. And so I think they're seeing, okay, maybe they can tolerate more. But I think if we knew everything and knew the how to get to to like the next dimension or the next plane of existence, like if we knew those things, like our minds couldn't comprehend it. So I think it's going to be something that comes in waves, and that's why I think so many of us are like coming online now, and it's just going to like continue to evolve as like time goes on. I mean, if we look back to where we are now, even just 50 years ago, like just how different it is. So what is it going to look like 50 years from now? And maybe we will be so much more enlightened. I was listening to something, was it yesterday? Maybe it might have been yesterday, Abby. I think it was on the panel, and they were saying how right now when we look back, that it'll probably be called like the Great Awakening,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many changes coming right now. So I think it probably is written into our contract, maybe not in like the language of, right, it's all to be like deciphered and to be translated the way we understand it. Because if we just had it in there very blatant, like our minds would be like, this isn't real, like this our minds just can't go there.
Right. Anna Marie, what are your thoughts around this? Could our understanding of higher dimensions, a higher dimensional plane, really like help our mental health, help our ability to process emotions and have emotional intelligence? Or do you agree with Nichole, whereas like if it just all came, if we found that button, we just go into mass psychosis?
I I do kind of agree with Nicole. I don't know about mass psychosis, but I think that what I have seen with the expansion of like, aliens and starseed stuff, people love to find out things about themselves, but then use that as not an excuse. I don't know if excuse is the word I want to use, but we'll just use excuse because I can't think of anything better right now. To that why they as to why they're staying the way that they are. So somebody, for example, a lot of people I know will be like, I'm a this starseed. That's why I'm super anxious and I can't communicate with other people and I can't hold down a job. And no hate, no shade, no pink lemonade. Like
No,
honestly, but like
we're
I
definitely gonna use the word excuses.
because so instead of using the information as like, oh, I can unlock higher consciousnesses or whatever to help me, it's now becoming something that allows them to stay stuck. People have been doing the same thing with like neurodivergent, or like thinking that they're on the autism spectrum, which like maybe you are. And I always ask clients whenever they're like, can we test for this? And I'm like, okay, but say you are, what is going to change about your life? What does that change? It doesn't change your treatment. It doesn't change anything like that. And so I think that yes, we might have access to those things, but I think inherently our souls choosing to come to earth, choosing to be humans, means that shit is messy. And the big thing about being humans is that we have to figure out, our souls are like trying to figure out how to take energy, whether it's higher consciousness or just energy in general, and turn it into the physical. And that's one of the things that all of us collectively are trying to use or trying to do. And so I don't I don't know that it would necessarily help, because I do think people would be like, nah, that's not real. Or they would use it as an excuse of like, oh, I came from this starseed planet, and that planet was destroyed eons ago, other lifetimes ago, like whatever. And then they would sit, and it would be a reason that things aren't working out, or a reason as to why they are going to stay feeling angry and staying at this certain vibration. So I would love to say that, like, yes, there, even if it was in the contract, even if the government was like, here is all the information from the like the Pleiadians, I think that's one of the names. I'm not very good with stars, but and this is what we need to do. I think that people would turn it into what they need it to be to support where they're at, because they're afraid of change, because there's a lot of ego in the way. And it's not anything that's saying, like, I'm not trying to throw shade at these people, but I just don't truly believe that just because we have the information that means that as humans we're going to use it in a way that actually helps us, because there's so much ego, and people get so comfortable in being sad, being angry. So that's one of the things where I see people being stuck in these emotions, because it almost gives them purpose, because there's a part of them that's afraid of the higher vibrations. When you live in a lower vibration for so long, you're terrified of the higher things, because there's so much shit that you have to weed through. Is it okay that I said shit?
Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
That you have to weed through, that it's just, it almost seems impossible. So they'll take that information and it'll just be simplified down into that lower vibration. And so I truly, that's where what I think would happen. And I don't think that it would make a difference, because I think that there's so many of us on so like different timelines, even within Earth, where some of us are like quantum leaping, and we had one soul contract, and then we kind of like did that shit early, and now we're like kind of onto another one. And then there's the other people that are kind of just like staying at different vibrations. And so we're all trying to work together. But that's my opinion on that. Did I answer all the questions?
Yes. Alison, do you think then that this idea of like moving from like this 3D to, I mean, people jump. People are like, we're going from 3 to 5. And in my opinion, or in my like thought process in that, is that everything about us is going to get better in some way, right? Our mental health is going to get better. Our ability to process it should get better, right? Moving up should allow us to do things better. Not necessarily that we like stop feeling angry or sad or whatever. I just think that should entail that we do those things better in some ways. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is it all kind of a moot point?
I do agree. I think that, yeah, at that point we will be doing stuff better, but it will be because, like, almost a little bit to like Anna Marie's point, like, it's not about the information, it's about like the integration into the physical. So, like, it's gonna be a process, it's gonna take time, and it's gonna take sort of like generations of one, I think, like, new souls coming in that are like ready for that. But also like us doing the work now to even be able to like be the parents, for example, of those types of people, because um yeah, like it's gonna rely on really it being integrated into how we're showing up physically, and like how we're embodying that every single day. um and that's just gonna take time. And so yes, I think there's like, oh yeah, like there's moments where people jump into the 5, and there are people who are there all the time, but it has to be, I feel like, more of a collective moving towards there, and like that is gonna take time. um because
What
it does take time, like the physical is in the realm of time, so it's
Sure.
gonna take that.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense for sure. Do you feel like if you could think, and obviously this is a very like broad general question, there's no right answer to it. But if you could think of like one thing that would be a really like solid good indicator that like we're moving in a good direction for for us to get to this like place of like harmony and whatever within our own physical bodies, and not even so much like mean, we could take it and expand it out to, humanity in general or whatever, but, since we are talking about mental health, and usually we kind of bring that down into the individual, what would be a good solid, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, I don't know
Indicator.
why yes, indicator of that we are moving in the right direction. That maybe not that we're like, oh, tomorrow we're going to be there, but that, like, we are taking that step forward, because as you're saying, it takes time, and it would take multiple generations or new consciousnesses coming in.
So you're saying sort of like on an individual basis, how would someone, for example, like watching this, know that they are sort of in that place where they are sort of moving towards that at least?
Yeah, if you wanted to take it there, or if you were like, you know what, if I could see the world do this, I would know that we're on the right track.
Hmm.
Either one.
I
I'm good with
think
either.
I think it really comes down to awareness. Um, so really being aware that it's all sort of our stuff in our journey versus projecting stuff onto other people, blaming other people, sort of to Anna Marie's point, but like that whole victim mentality, like I think that is an indication that you're still playing into the ego. Like that's where the ego feels safe. So where can it's like when you have that ability to be very aware of, like, yes, you're still gonna have those thoughts of like, oh, why did this happen to me? Or you're still gonna have that thought of like, or you're still gonna have like that feeling of sadness or anger, or you're gonna want to have that reaction. But where can you bring awareness in and recognize like it is not necessarily like your essence, but it's maybe a part of you that is reacting to a trigger, right? So like even just that awareness, I think, is what brings it back to taking responsibility for it. So it really comes down to like when people start taking responsibility for what's showing up in their life, whether it's within their mental health or within a relationship or within their career. I think that's like the biggest step forward, because the second that you take responsibility is the second that you have like the ability to change things. And so like if we want to see change, it's going to start with like us all beginning to have like take radical responsibility for what's showing up.
Nichole, I know that you may be at work. This is going to be the last question. What would be one thing that you could see, or that if you saw it, you would be like, we're on the right track?
Oh man, I think I think there's so much division right now in the world, and I know that there kind of always like has been just, like a lot of polarity, but I think if we were to see some of that minimize a little bit, I think that would help us. I think that would help me to know that we were on the right track, because I mean, I feel like I just keep seeing it growing, and that tells me like, no, 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 we're going like the opposite way. And I think like it's making our work um as like light workers and as healers like more difficult, because now we have like more to do and more to work with. So I think for me, I would have to see just a lot of the division, because I think part of like I know at least for me in my journey is seeing like I'm able to see all sides of something, and I think that really came from like my intuitive practice and really just trying to see all perspectives. And I don't think that that is something that we're seeing a lot of. Yeah, so I would want to say I personally think that would be the indicator for me.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Anna Marie, last words.
Oh
What's
gosh,
the indicator?
this is a hard one for me. I've been thinking about it the whole time, and I was like, dang, I thought that I would. Okay, so
You were thinking hard. I
I
was
know
like,
I was like,
she's gonna
dang.
noodle herself right into
I was like, dang,
the
what's the
stratosphere.
indicator? At least on a collective basis, I would say if I saw more people feeling their genuine emotions a little bit more openly, that's what would tell me. Because a lot of times when I see people who are feeling their feelings, it's a lot of times with the intention of like getting something, right? Like it making somebody give them pity, even people who are like, oh yes, I've been this and this way. A lot of times it's to get something in return, as opposed to just like truly wallowing, I guess, or like truly like just having your feelings. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but
No, yeah.
essentially, like I would love to see the way that we understand emotion and mental illness shift from, okay, this is preventing me from living my life, to understanding it differently as like, okay, that just means I'm misaligned. So that means there's something better on the other side of this, whatever this is. And I would say that would be a pretty good indicator for me. I will say that I am a true believer that things get worse before they get better. So like, you know, Nichole was saying, she's like, I just see so much, and she feel like we're going the opposite direction. I actually feel like for a lot of it that I'm like, okay, I was like, yes, this is shitty. I hate this for us. But I feel like so much stuff was under the covers for so long that like it has to get very out in the open before we can be like, okay, now we know for a fact that this is something that we have to work on. So I'll say that as well, but definitely the genuineness of it, and not just, you know, not just kind of like the fakeness that we see through social media, people kind of talking about feelings and things like that, but I don't always feel like it's very genuine. And that could just be my intuitiveness picking it up from different places. But yeah, I'll stick with that one.
We did it. We completed the entire soul contract series. This was the final part of the mental health edition of this soul contract series, and I can't tell you how fulfilled I am right now. It's amazing to me that all of these amazing women wanted to sit down and have conversations around some really tough topics, as well as topics that maybe they weren't 100% well versed in. This is what we call moving the conversation forward and really truly expanding our minds and our souls. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with anyone that you feel like needs this conversation. Also, check down in the show notes. You will find all the different ways to connect with the panelists and, of course, myself. And I will see you next time on the Next Breath of Life conversation.